I'm Susie Hess.
And I'm Yehuda Price. This is Our Stories Matter.
JC, what's up, bro? So in case everybody don't know, it's my boy JC, James Cavitt. When I was released from prison, I contacted Romero and Ralston at Project Rebound, Cal State Fullerton. I was just kind of inquiring about, their Masters of Social Work program. Wasn't really too interested in what they can do for me because, again, somebody from prison, I pretty much figured I had to do everything myself and that there wasn't going to be any help for me. So I wasn't really looking for any particular help. She said, no, we actually have a great program. At least we have the first collegiate housing in the for people who are formerly incarcerated in the country. And so she let me in and I went to this housing, the Irwin House. And that's where I met JC. And to me, for somebody, as I mentioned before, I just used to browse on my contraband cell phone about my vision of being a social worker. But to meet him, he was already at Cal State Fullerton, wrapping up his final semester. And he was, planning to get his MSW the next, to start his program the next semester. So to me, in a sense, this was a role model of somebody who's actually been living the life out here of what I wanted to live. And he had a job. And to me, again, being out of jail and having a job, it's such a stabilizing factor, and it lends itself to how you view yourself as being competent and able to survive in this world. So JC was actually to, exemplify that and show me what was possible. So it's so awesome to come back full circle and have him on this podcast because he is so insightful. He has such an important message for people. So it's just great to have you here, JC.
Man, thank you, my brother. Thank you. It's so good to see you as well. I can remember, I don't jump the gun, but I can remember when you first got here, when I first met you, you were one of the few people that I've come across that your drive, your passion to succeed and excel, I don't see that very often, and that's not to downplay all of the other scholars that I come into contact with. But I think that there are some individuals who have our shared experience and they come out with a different kind of focus. And that's one thing that I can say about you. You came out with a different kind of focus. And I'm so proud to see all that you've accomplished in such a short period of time. So I'm proud of you, man. You talk about I inspire you. You inspiring me right now.
Thank you. And I think it lends to kind of what hopefully we'll go into today about that community aspect to it. And, and that's what you were building over there. And, and it's a community that what keeps people productive and able to make that transition from prison to where we're at now. A stable, productive member of society. I want to just jump into the questions, right? And I'm going to ask you, so I want you to describe your work related to trauma and spoken word, but I'm going to throw in something too as well, right? So think about your answer, but since, you did that spoken word with John Legend live from San Quentin, that I want on this podcast for you to bust out a little spoken word. I think that's fair. I think that is fair. So before you bust out that spoken word, can you describe your work related to trauma and spoken word?
And I just want to say hi, I'm super excited to meet you. And the only thing I know about you is that you performed with John Legend. You were friends with Yehuda. You were a role model with Yehuda. So yeah, I'm crazy excited to meet you. And I cannot believe you performed with John Legend at San Quentin. So that's that.
And my bad. I was so excited to hear about the spoken word. Like, oh yeah, there is a co-host, right? Hey, my bad.
He's so awesome.
Well, thank you. So I think you put me on the spot, though. I'll let you know that. But with my in relation to my work to trauma, so I think at the very foundational stage is that I feel like I'm a product of trauma, having grown up in the Bay Area, being a part of a household that was very dysfunctional, a lot of physical abuse, drug addiction, homelessness, foster care system. So I've experienced firsthand a lot of that trauma, even before I ever stepped foot into the carceral system. And I think for many of our folks, the exposure to trauma before they ever came into contact with the system needs to be addressed and talked about as well, because a lot of times we think that the trauma happens on the inside, where really many individuals, if not most or all, have already experienced trauma, or at least been exposed to some form of significant trauma before they found themselves incarcerated. So I have to acknowledge that piece, that I already brought with me to the system some brokenness. And then the system in the beginning stages of my incarceration, it only compounded that brokenness, because I was a young man. I went in at 17 years old, tried as an adult, spent 22 years in the system trying to navigate that and figure out what does it mean to be a man growing up in an environment that I really didn't identify with. And I wanted to be like none of the individuals that I saw when I first entered the system. But there were gentlemen along the way that I did kind of take a liking to, and they became role models per se. And I had to address my trauma in that environment, which is extremely difficult, to be vulnerable in an environment that is conducive and predatory, to where if you show this vulnerability or weakness, people can prey on that. They can take advantage of that. But at the same time, I realized that what I wanted was more than what I had at that moment. And I really wanted to understand, how did my life, even as broken as it was, I still had these aspirations as a young person of going to school, going on to college. As a matter of fact, growing up, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I had goals of being a doctor, and that's always what I wanted to be. And so I found myself in prison at 17 years old, and how did I get here? That was the question, because when you look at my academic track record, even though there was a lot of trauma going on in my life, school was the one place that was my safe place. It was the place that I felt seen and heard and validated, and I excelled in school. But yet at 17, I find myself in the backseat of a cop car with handcuffs on, looking at a life sentence. And so I, for my own personal reasons, wanted to understand, where did I go wrong? How did I allow myself to get in a situation to where, one, I caused such great harm, but two, now my life is impacted for the next couple of decades. And so I really sat down and started to do the hard work of self-exploration and ask myself the tough questions and re-examine things in my life that I tried to stuff and forget about. And it was a slow, long journey for me addressing my own trauma. But over the years, little by little, kind of stuck my foot in the water and starting with the toe, and see how people would respond to me just opening up about a little bit of the things that I experienced as a young person. And that journey continued. Every year I kind of went a little bit further and was allowing myself to be more vulnerable. And one of the things that I've learned is that I wasn't alone. My trauma I thought was unique to me, and so I didn't want to talk about it. But the truth of the matter is, when I was in these groups, inside of these prison settings, and when I allowed myself to be vulnerable, this gave permission for other men to also be vulnerable. And what I found out is that, again, my experience is not unique to me. Many, many of men inside have been exposed to some severe trauma. And so kind of fast forward in my journey, done almost every single self-help group that you can imagine, no matter what prison that I was at. And if it was beneficial to me, I felt that, I want to go through and learn how to be a trainer and facilitator so that I can give back to my community within the walls. And so that's how I first started kind of doing this trauma work and sitting in group settings, talking about unprocessed early childhood trauma, talking about anger management, parenting classes, conflict resolution, nonviolent communication, you name it, I was in it and a part of it. And I found that I had the ability to take some really broad concepts or difficult concepts that most people struggle to understand and just make it simple and speak in a language that people on the inside or behind the walls could relate to. They can personalize it and then apply it to their own lives. Since then, I've been employed with both Insight Prison Project, doing trauma-informed care, trauma work, training volunteers to go inside of incarceral settings and do this work with offenders, process things that they have never, ever shared with other human beings before. In addition to that, now I'm employed with Uncommon Law, which is a Bay Area law firm that specializes in working with long-term offenders and offenders who's been sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And again, this is a trauma-informed approach, what we're doing with them, and hopefully giving them the fundamental tools that they need, that when they do go to the board, that they're able to talk about their trauma in such a way that it shows accountability, insight, remorse, that they hopefully can earn their freedom and liberation.
Oh my gosh. I mean, everything you said, I wanted to like get in every single moment. So one, I love that you teach and you go in there. And I think the biggest part is folks with lived experience are more tuned than if you didn't have that lived experience. And so I think it's awesome in terms of all the work that you're doing, because they would rather talk with you than talk with me, who hasn't been formally incarcerated. So I think the power that you're coming in, right, with all the knowledge and the empathy, the attunement, the connection, I think that is huge. And we know that hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
So yeah, and you are just the most, just right now, like such a compassionate human being. And I'm just so excited to hear about all of your work. I mean, I know offline I'll be getting in there even more because I'm super excited about the trauma-informed work, like all of it. So with the pandemic then, how has that caused you to radically like reimagine this work as folks are obviously still inside, high risk for COVID? I mean, you know, it's pretty painful witnessing that.
Wait, real quick, Susie, can you hold on to that question, right? Because I think that is a good question. But I think he avoided something or he left something out.
Yeah, he did.
That I had mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Can you just add a little bit to the spoken word piece? I don't believe people understand how well you are at putting together words and expressing that sort of trauma that you spoke about in a way that resonates with people. And you did that live from San Quentin. I don't know if that's been done before in that way where John Legend was performing. And if you don't perform for us, we will pull that clip from YouTube. So I'm giving you the opportunity. But if you, regardless if you perform it or not, though, if you just speak to that that component of it.
Absolutely. Thank you for recalling that. So the spoken word for me, it started off very early on in my journey. And again, I was very guarded, didn't want to be vulnerable. And so one of the ways that I expressed myself was just through poetry. And in the beginning, I wasn't a spoken word artist. I simply wrote. And I remember coming across when I was in juvenile hall, there was this advertisement in the newspaper that it was a poetry contest. And the grand prize was $25,000. And me, knowing that I got legal issues, I said, you know what? I'm going to send one of these things that I write to this contest and just see what happens. I need this money to pay for legal fees. And one of the things that caught my mind about the contest in this advertisement, it said that we will respond to all entries and give you feedback. And at the time, I didn't know whether the stuff that I was writing was profound or good or bad. I just wrote. And I sent it in. And I wound up placing second in this contest and won some camera. But the feedback that they gave me was really valuable, and it's what I think kept me writing. And they said that I was good. There's like, you're a talented artist. You're one of our finalists in this grand prize for $25,000. And they encouraged me, like, keep writing, just keep writing. And that's what I did. And so in the coming years, I just continued to write, and I didn't share my poetry with anyone. And so it accumulated over the years. And then when I got transferred to San Quentin, I wound up being a founding member of a program called The Last Mile. And when we first started, The Last Mile was a program that taught incarcerated folks how to be entrepreneurs, how to come up with your business plan and pitch that plan. And so for the next couple of years, I was performing inside of San Quentin. Every single demo day that we had, I performed, and it led to me performing with MC Hammer, Butterscotch Clinton, who was the runner-up for America's Got Talent Season 2, performed for the governor, his wife, and John Legend, who was launching his campaign, reached out to The Last Mile and Chris Redless and said, hey, I'm doing this performance at the TED, the major TED. in Vancouver. And I would love it if I can get, an artist from San Quentin to like collaborate with me. And Chris instantly thought of me. And the institution at San Quentin at first was dead set against it. Absolutely not. We cannot allow this to happen. All of the security and safety issues that the prison kind of normally throw out there whenever you bring cameras behind the wall. And long story short, I wrote this piece, and John Legend was doing his thing on stage. He introduced me. I performed, and the rest is kind of history. That video went viral, and just millions of folks saw the video. And the piece is it's become a staple in one of the things that I perform because it's asked for, But originally it just started as me as an outlet, So some people journal. I just wrote spoken word. So you want to hear a little bit of it?
We want to hear a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can even. Okay, let's see. So the piece that I performed with him is called Where I Live. I used to live in a world where most people are too afraid to go, surrounded by tall concrete bars and steel walls where razor wire have a way of cutting away the hopes for a brighter tomorrow. I used to live in a world that killed people who kill people in order to teach people that killing people is wrong. Imagine that. Better yet, imagine a world where healed people helped hurt people heal and become whole. Maybe then we would all be singing redemption song. I used to live in a world that has been called hell on earth by those trapped inside of it. But I've come to the stark realization that prison, it really is what you make of it. You see, in spite of the harshness of my reality, there was a silver lining because I knew that my freedom was going to come. It was just a matter of timing. So I treated my first steps as if they were my last mile. And I realized that you don't have to be free in order to experience freedom. And just because you're free doesn't mean that you have freedom. I mean, let's face it, many of us for years have been battling our inner demons. Sure, we walk around smiling when inside we're really screaming freedom. Don't you get it? We're all serving time. We're just in different places. Now, as for me, I choose to be free from the prisons that I've created. The key, forgiveness. Actions are my witness. If we want freedom, then we have to think different. Because freedom, it isn't a place. It's a mind setting. And once we set our minds on finally being free, listen, we can't expect others to free us from ourselves when we alone are the ones with the key. So no matter whether you're in here or you're out there, whenever you're ready, you have the power and you're capable of being free.
Oh my God, what?
Let me tell you something, JC. Normally, I wouldn't ask a guest on the spot, you know what, go perform, right? Just so, our listeners know, he had no preparation. This was literally Susie saying, hey, do you think he'll do a spoken word? Well, that's a great idea. So, but I felt just knowing you and who you are and your capabilities, that you would deliver. And boy, did you deliver.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I connected with everything that you were saying, which I think is the beauty of your words, right? It's for folks inside and outside.
Absolutely.
And what you said is, just because I forgot the exact phrase, but being locked up doesn't mean that you're not free. You could still find freedom within your mind. And us out here are still locked up in our minds.
Absolutely. That Susie, is one of the hardest things for me when I came home to adjust to that. And when I was navigating spaces and to see how standoffish communities where I was in were, and you could almost literally see the bondage that folks were in. And then when I go inside of these correctional spaces to see some of the freedom, how men are truly living as their authentic selves, and they're not afraid to be themselves, was refreshing for me. And I can remember the first time that I went back into a correctional facility only 6 weeks after I got out of one. There was a huge element of it that just felt like home for me. There was a realness there. There was a genuineness there that in the 6 weeks that I had been home, I didn't see, and so I longed for that deep connection, not just that kind of, oh, hey, how you doing? And I've got accustomed to being around realness and people wanting to address their issues. And when I came home, I didn't see that often.
Wow. And so do you find using spoken word I would assume is super helpful for the connection of the pain and the freedom that we're experiencing and folks who are inside experiencing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And whether it's spoken word, whether it's rap, whether it's dance, whether it's music, folks need an outlet to express their pain, their hurt, their anger even, and so that's part of the message when I do perform. Maybe it's not spoken word for a particular individual, but they have something that they could use as an intervention to help process their experience.
Wow. Hearing you too, and then I think about just a role model of who you are in terms of dismantling toxic masculinity, right? And writing poetry and expressing your feelings and using art and music. I think that is super powerful for folks on the inside and the outside. And like you said, there's such an authenticity on the inside. Out here, we're sort of conditioned not to be authentic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you said some toxic masculinity is killing us. It is dismantling society, this toxic masculinity. And we as men, we have to do a better job at dismantling that. I can recall an incident that happened. I was in I was in Vacaville. I was in Vacaville State Prison. And this guy fell down metal stairs, like boom, 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 fell down. And that metal, it was the metal that even had the spikes on it. So it wasn't just flat metal. And I watched him tumble down these metal steps, and it looked like it hurt. And he got up, and he brushed himself off real quick. And folks was like, man, you all right? You all right? And he poked his chest out and squared his shoulder. I'm good. I'm cool. And I'm watching this like, man, that looked like it hurt like hell. But this toxic masculinity, especially in that environment that says I have to be strong and I have to be tough and I can't show that I'm hurting, that man could have very well broke his back, broke his neck and some other bones. And yet he gets up and like a rubber band, try to bounce back versus just to express and acknowledge the hurt that you may be feeling. And I think that so many men today walk around having the wounds of falling down, and instead of expressing that pain and that hurt that they're experiencing, they wear the mask. Everything's good when everything is not good. And I think one of the most crucial things that we can do as men is simply acknowledge our hurt. Not acknowledge it. And what I found out is when I do acknowledge it, there are people around me that are willing to step in and give me a hand. And so I'm okay. I can be hurt and I can express that hurt and pain and I can still be okay. And it doesn't take away from my masculinity. In fact, it adds to it.
Yeah. You have to be very brave. I would assume that you would have to be brave to have that sort of thought process of, expressing your feelings and saying I'm hurt on the inside. Outside it's hard too, but I would think especially on the inside in terms of just survival. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But I think the more individuals who model that, the more easier it becomes for others, to do the same.
For sure. And so can you talk about what it's been like? I'm curious for you going in, obviously supporting folks who are currently incarcerated. There's a pandemic. Obviously the numbers are super high in prisons and jails. What has the pandemic sort of created in terms of how to provide that support and that connection as the trauma has increased inside?
Oh, absolutely. It's been difficult, to be honest. It's been difficult because I feel like my calling, even now as a social worker, is to work with this particular population, the both incarcerated and the reentry. And being a person who enjoys actually going back inside and doing this work, It's been difficult the last year. As a matter of fact, when the pandemic the shutdown happened, I was actually inside with Uncommon Law running a workshop. And one of the camera crew folks that we accompanied us, they had informed us that they tested positive, or another camera person had tested positive. And so we had to make the decision right in front of the prison, like, we're not going to go in. You know, we didn't want to possibly bring in if one of us had been exposed. But I haven't been in now in a year, literally this month, make a year. And it's been difficult because I lost friends. I lost one brother in particular, Michael Hampton. I honor this brother because his fingerprints is on my success. And because of this pandemic, it cost him his life. And it's sad because he has a beautiful family, beautiful support system that was waiting for him. And he was scheduled to go in front of the board of parole hearings, and he was ready and prepared. And I believe that he would have been found suitable and released. And he never made it. You know, he never made it out. And so I think about him often. And when I got the news, just how the whole thing transpired, and notification and family members not being allowed to have access to certain medical information when you're incarcerated, which is, we have to do a better job around that. And people who are on the inside for the past year not being allowed to program, you know, vital programs that they need, especially when you have to appear before the Board of Parole hearings in order to regain your freedom. And what's happening is people aren't prepared. The groups that are vital to their success and helping them tell their narratives and understand the impact of the harm that they're caused, they're trying to navigate this on their own, and many of them were failing. And on top of that, there was one client that we had who the district attorney in this case, and he had never, you know, supposedly been on Zoom and all of the board hearings now are on this virtual platform. And the board tried to make a case against him being found suitable because he didn't know how to unmute himself.
No.
Like, how do you, and it's a catch-22 because if I did know how to unmute myself, then you're going to say I had access to illegal contraband.
Oh, yes.
So you damned if you do, damned if you don't. But it's been extremely difficult because I know that folks still need this information. And so what we did with Uncommon Law, we pivoted. And so we're in the midst of, actually close to the end of, getting ready to launch a completely correspondence-based kind of trauma-informed board parole course. And it's called Home After Harm. And it's been a journey the last year trying to get everything that we do in a face-to-face delivery model to try to incorporate that in a correspondence course. And it's just difficult because it's not the same. And so we know that the learning comes from being in this group container, you know, and interacting with one another. And so we acknowledge the challenges that we're going to have because we kind of been told that this year, for the rest of the year, is not looking like we're going to have access to go back inside. And so one of the approaches that we did was, okay, we have to provide something because folks are still going to the board. Folks still need this information. And so that's one way in which we pivoted. And then as an organization, I think the pandemic, it's brought some unique positive aspects as well. And one of those that I'm seeing is the cross-pollination of organizations. And so with Project Rebound, for instance, we are now in collaboration with organizations all the way in Tennessee and on the East Coast in New York. And we're having this conversation that had the pandemic not occurred, we may not be having otherwise. And there's other organizations that like what we're doing with Project Rebound and want to replicate or do something similar to what we're doing. And so now that we're at the table and having these dialogues, it's great. It kind of reminds me of this thing like iron sharpens iron, you know. And so I do like that aspect of what the pandemic has brought. But again, it's still challenging. Folks on the inside, it's a hotbed for this virus, you know. And again, just we have to do better. We have to do better. And there are folks that are on the inside that they serve their time. You know, they deserve the right. They paid whatever penance that folks feel that they should pay. and they should be home. They should be home. And so now it's about me trying to help them get home.
Wow.
Yeah, I could listen to you. I've often listened to you, right? Since we have this this history, and especially the direction that your life continues to go, right? It's kind of me knowing you from when I knew you from, and then just seeing you continue to go on this particular trajectory. So I know there's no limits to what you can do. I want to, we live in unprecedented times. Like it seems to be we're at a certain point in our history, like this racial reckoning and whatnot. And, our relationship to, United States, the particular social milieu that we find ourselves in within the United States at this particular time. So I was wanting to know, what does healing from the United States look like?
Man, that is such a deep question. It really is, because there's no easy fix. The problems that we're seeing now that are highlighted, they've been going on with the Black community forever. The relationships, how law enforcement treat Black people and Black bodies and Black communities. This isn't new for many Black folks. This is the world that we grew up in. And I think what's changed now is that these incidences are now being filmed and captured and documented. And so in the past, when Black bodies were saying, like, this is happening to us, both in our communities and even more in the carceral setting, and no one wanted to believe. Our narrative, our experience was like ignored. And now it's hard to ignore it. It's really hard to ignore it. And as far as like addressing it, I think the very first thing we have to do is simply acknowledge it. How do we tend to a wound that we're not even willing to acknowledge? And so the very first thing we have to do as a nation is simply to acknowledge our history, be it as ugly as it is. Let's say that this is real. And what people of color are experiencing, although some may not understand it, don't take away from the fact that this is real and it's happening. So that's the first thing. Let's acknowledge the historical pain, the racism, the oppression that we have been enduring since we've been brought to this country. That's the very first thing. I think the second thing after we acknowledge it is, let's stop doing things to make it worse. When we see Black bodies murdered on camera, solely, and I'm gonna say simply because they were Black, and folks thought that they had the power to do it and walk away. And historically, that's what has happened. Black bodies have been murdered, hung from trees, shot, drugged from behind cars, and people have walked away scot-free. And so there's a sense of entitlement to where I can do what I want to do to this group of people, and I can walk away scot-free, no penalties whatsoever. And I think that is what's causing a lot of the uproar, a lot of the protests, is because people are fed up. Hold folks accountable the same way that you hold people of color accountable. And I don't think that we would have this much tension and turmoil if folks would just simply, let's have one law, one constitution that applies for everybody. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have it. So one, acknowledge it. Two, stop making it worse by letting folks just walk away from this violence scot-free or with a slap on the hand and move you to another department. Let's not do that. I think after we acknowledge, after we stop making it worse, then we have to tend to the wound. We have to address some of these oppressive and racist institutions that still operate today. We have to clean this up. We have to go back and say, what are all of the sticking points? What are all of these barriers that the communities of color are constantly bringing to the forefront, saying that this is a problem? Our criminal justice system is just one issue. Education in this country for people of color is another issue. Health disparities is another issue. There's so many instances that we as a country can go back and start to address some of these things that we know are wrong. We know are wrong, but as a broader community, a broader nation, I think we continue to turn a blind eye to these communities as if they don't matter. And right now, what we're seeing in our nation, this uprising, people are pissed off because they're saying we do matter. We are here. We do the same things that everyone else do, and we want to be acknowledged and treated with respect and dignity like everybody else. We're not asking for extras. We're just asking for the same rights and liberties that these other groups have, you know? So we got to clean up. We got to clean up. And then we have to just tend. We have to tend. And any wound that we are exposed to is going to take time. It's going to take time. And if we don't clean it up, if we just try to do this cosmetic thing on the surface, what happens is the infection festers. It festers, and then we start to see this racial tension that is very clear in our nation today. And that's because we have allowed this thing to get infected, and we haven't addressed it. And it's an infection at this point, you know. And with wounds, a lot of times you can go to surgery, and it's not the surgery that kills most folks. It's the infections that occur after the surgery has been had. And so that's why doctors are always constantly checking in and tending and the follow-up. And we have to do that. We have to make sure that when we address this wound with all of these different systems, we have to be conscious of, like, we can't do it just cosmetically. We can't put a Band-Aid on it. We can't just throw money at this situation and at the problem. It has to go deeper than that, you know. And the last thing I would say is that we have to give it time. Wounds take time to heal. But if we're tending to them, if we're acknowledging them, we're not doing anything to make it worse. We've cleaned it up. And if we just give it time, I believe that the wound can heal.
Wow. I agree 100%. And you both probably will be interested in this, since all three of us are social workers. So I just received, there's a town hall, part of NASW NYT, New York, NYS, New York State. And it's about how to revolutionize our profession. So how to dismantle, you know, a lot of the toxic, you know, white culture that does exist within the social work profession. And that just, I mean, Yehuda and I met as an Unchained Scholar, right, of students who are formerly incarcerated. And every school of social work should be having a movement to dismantle the collateral consequences to be a student. So, you know, I also see, like, in our profession, there's so much we can do on a policy level and also just on community healing. So I think about, in terms of the community healing piece, how do you see community healing as political, and how do you see spoken word as healing and community healing?
We have to empower our communities of color. I think for far too long, folks have been marginalized, discarded, and then they've internalized that to believing that we're not worthy or our vote is not going to make a difference. And so it keeps them on the sidelines. And I love the work that Stacey Abrams doing with communities of color and really bringing that empowerment back to them and recognizing that, no, your vote does count, you know, and it does matter. And we have to mobilize the strength that is in these communities. That's one, with the political piece that, and it's interesting because historically, when we look at especially the Black male bodies in the carceral system, and what we understand is that once you're labeled as a felon, many of the rights that we gained as a result of civil rights have been stripped away once you have that scarlet letter of a felon on your jacket. And so we're pushed out and disenfranchised from this political process because you're either on parole, probation, or you have this felony. When you look at the numbers, the actual numbers of folks in our country that are people of color who have a criminal record that have almost been permanently disenfranchised from this political process, that's a huge voting block, you know. And so making sure that in California, I'm glad that we're starting to move in that direction to where now folks who are on parole can have access to their political power and vote. We got to get people voting, not on just on a national level, but on a local level. those politicians that run the neighborhoods and the communities that we are actively in, they have got to get involved and have a say-so on who governs over them. So that's one thing. Another piece of this political process with law enforcement and how we're thinking about reimagining the criminal justice system. Oftentimes, the folks who police our neighborhoods and our communities, they're not a part of our neighborhoods and communities. But yet they come in badge and gun on hip and they want to regulate our neighborhoods. And so I would like to see law enforcement be a part of the community that you're tasked with policing. Get to know community leaders and stakeholders in that community. Know them so that they can really understand that you are here for me in a good way. And right now, I don't think a lot of that is happening because there's this distance. And one thing I love about Brian Stevenson, he talks about proximity. And once we get closer to the problem, we can get closer to the solution. But the issue is when I don't live here, when all I do is come in and police, there's this disconnect from me as a cop and you as a citizen or a community member. We have to narrow that gap. We have to bring them closer to where it's not cops and robbers, good guys, bad guys, but we're all in this and we make up this community together. I think with regards to the spoken word piece, the gifts that people have in the community, we need to highlight them. They are expressive. They are powerful. And it may not be mainstream for most Americans, but for that community to have a voice and some outlet that can unify that community, we need it. And I hope, like being a spoken word, I hope more people would express themselves through that platform. But even watching like a lot of social media now and with the video blogging, to see people start to tell their narrative in their unique way is beautiful. And so I'm hoping we can get more of the stories out in these communities that highlight their beauty and their success and their resilience.
Yes. And, we see storytelling as changing the narrative, especially hearing your story and Yehuda's story and everyone who's come before, that there's a different narrative and there's many false narratives.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate your narrative. I mean, everything you said, I can just go in for like an additional hour because it's super powerful. And what you're saying also, there's so much about the relational piece that if law enforcement had relationships, hey, if they knew you and they're not going to want to hurt you if they know you. So, yeah.
Yeah. To echo what Susie said, definitely could listen to you expound upon these very important issues, right? I think that's why we're having you on here. These are very important issues and a lot of people have different opinions on it. And I think coming from this trauma-informed lens and with your life experience of dealing with trauma at all types of stages, pre-incarceration, during incarceration, and then making that transition out, and then trying to alleviate the effects of that trauma with the population when you go inside prison, I think is just amazing work and you're paying it forward. I just want to ask you, what action steps can listeners begin to take if they would like to get involved with all that you're doing, whether it's Uncommon Law, Project Rebound, or anything else you may want to let the listeners know about?
I think the very first action step I would say is get involved. Understand that what's happening in the world affects you too, even if you're standing on the sideline. And so that involvement could be something as simple as writing a letter to your local assembly person and congressman, get involved with agencies and nonprofits that are in the community that you recognize is trying to strengthen people within that community. Volunteer. A lot of the work, not much gets done without the help of volunteers. People want to get paid for their experience and their knowledge, but the volunteer circuit, we need that. We need people to help mobilize, and folks who do have certain expertise, bring that to the table, whatever it is, but don't sit on the sideline and just stand by and watch the injustice, the oppression continue to happen. And the very least someone could do that if they hear something that is racist, at their own kitchen table. A lot of these conversations and bigotry and prejudice remarks happen within people's households. Check it. Call it out. Stop turning a blind eye to it, because until we acknowledge it, again, nothing will change. So get involved. Start speaking up.
Okay. Thank you, JC, for coming here, for speaking to these particular issues in a way of articulation that a lot of people haven't experienced before. And so I appreciate you coming there. And I appreciate you being a role model, not just to myself, but to countless other souls that cross your path in the work you're doing. You're doing it for the people, and you're really giving your life to it. It's for all the poor choices that we have made, you're kind of example that, first of all, those poor choices don't define who you are. And also that redemption is possible no matter where a person has been. And thank you for, being a testament that and a shining example of that. And we would love to have you back maybe in another season or maybe at another event. I think Unchained Scholars, I told them to schedule you to speak. Have you been scheduled to speak?
I've not been scheduled just yet. Do reach out to me, but I'm looking forward to that. Thanks to the both of you as well, man. This is amazing that you all are using this platform to highlight critical issues that we need to be discussing. And again, brother, I'm so impressed and amazed by your success, and I encourage you to continue to pave the way.
All the time, bro. One love. Thanks for having you.
Thank you, JC. I'm so happy we met, and I hope this is just the beginning.
As do I.
We'd like to thank our listeners, and special thanks to Arts in Action, part of USC Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative, for their generous support. Arts in Action, part of USC Visions and Voices, plants seeds for positive social change by activating intensive art projects between community partners, students, and faculty. Today's episode is written and produced by Susie Hess and Yehuda Price. Today's music is co-written and produced by Yehuda Price, utilizing a contraband cell phone while in prison. Our Stories Matter is brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Our Stories Matter, and our website at traumainformedla.org. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more folks can have access and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep recording and healing through our storytelling episodes.
Life, it's the life we live. Modern day slavery pursuing cheddar. Life, it's the life we live. Whips and chains trying to duck the 12th letter.
Mamas tell us be good, obey mass, so don't be like daddy all in the hood, okay, bad.